Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goret.
Let me pick up from what Madeline said. It's not only what these forces are, it's what we are not doing as the United States of America. We used to be the leader of the world that wanted to be free. It was a term I used to use all the time. We were the ones who, after World War II, created an environment of alliances, of democracy. And it spread, and it did very, very well. But in recent years, the pressures and the forces that Madeline talked about has come into play. And what are we doing? We're walking away from agreements. We're walking away from the alliances, frankly, that we used to have. The president goes to Europe to a NATO meeting, but he starts out by insulting some of the other participants, our allies. And so America has to take a hard look at itself, and especially the Congress. Take a hard look at yourself and see what we are doing to try to keep these forces in check and put America back in the middle of all this, as opposed to being sort of a reluctant player and trying to pull out of agreements rather than helping to make new agreements. With respect to Charlottesville, and not just Charlottesville, but a general situation within the country, I'm deeply troubled by what happened in Charlottesville, but also by the fact that we are now seeing these fissures to break out in our society among blacks and whites, Latinos and others, immigrants and those who are not immigrants. This is so unfortunate, because when I look at what's happened in the last 50 years and what I've been able to do as a son of immigrants and a black kid rise to the top of our government, I'm so proud of that. And yet we still have these forces that are pulling us apart. And those forces are being encouraged by some of the things that are happening in political life. And we should not let that happen. The savior to all this are our children. And I tell many stories about the kids I talk to and how they're growing up learning not to hate rather than learning to hate. So what we have to do is focus on our young people. Some of the old folks, if that's the way they feel, that's the way they feel. They're not going to change. But we have to make sure that we are teaching all of our children in school, in the home, everywhere, that it is not right to hate in this country. This is a country of love. This is a country of kindness. This is a country that we reach out to each other and we reach out to the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is expecting that of us, and they're seeing less and less of us, and that's part of the major problem we have.
Do you think this president can be a moral leader for the world?
I don't know that he can do that, because right now that is not the way he is acting. Let me give you an example. My favorite three words in our Constitution is the first three words: we the people. We the people. But recently it's become me the president, as opposed to we the people. And you see things that should not be happening. How can a president of the United States get up and say that the media is the enemy of Americans? Hasn't he read the First Amendment? You're not supposed to like everything the press says or what anyone says in the First Amendment. That's why we have a First Amendment, to protect that kind of speech. So if we keep doing things like this and creating additional fissures in our society, it's not going to serve us well on the international stage. And I hope the president can come to the realization that he should really stop insulting people. And I used this 2 years ago when I said I could not vote for him in the 2016 election. And why? He insulted everybody. He insulted African Americans. He insulted women. He insulted immigrants. He insulted our best friends around the world. He used it. He insulted all of his fellow candidates up on the stage during the debates. And I don't think that's what should be coming out of the President of the United States. But I don't see anything that's changed in the last 2 years.
It is Monday, the 8th of October of 2018. Yes, Indigenous Peoples Day. Or Canada's Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, Canada. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, indeed. Well, what a weekend, huh? A lot of people think that maybe that tax fraud story that Trump and his family have endeavored in since, well, he was, 3 years old or earlier? is just going to be forgotten because it dropped during Kavanaugh week. I actually think that those people may be sadly mistaken because it's only going to get louder. There's a little bit of a lull, but I think that we're going to be hearing a lot more, and a lot more people are going to be maybe a little mad. Now, we do know that his base will look at his tax cheating as an admirable quality. Oh, you were able to cheat on your taxes? I want to learn how to do that too. And I suppose what Trump could claim is that he's just a sovereign citizen and the rules of America don't apply to him, but instead he became the President of the United States, which is almost like being a sovereign citizen in his mind. He can do what he wants. Well, a lot more. Oh, Taylor Swift! Wow, I thought the Nazis claimed her. Boy, they're mad now. Yeah, she is campaigning against Marsha Blackburn there in Tennessee. And that says a lot right there. I was wondering about Taylor because when the Nazis, the 4chan Nazis, embraced her as being one of them, she never denied it. I always wondered about that. But there's a lot of artists out there who, or entertainers, let's put it that way, who fear that if they make a stand that they might, lose some audience. And I don't know. I guess that's the difference between being an artist and an entertainer then, because an artist, really isn't doing it for, the people he doesn't like. Let's just put it that way. Or she doesn't like. That's just a little inside baseball, maybe. Now, entertainers, they'll take the money wherever it comes because, it's hard. It's hard. Speaking of which, they're paying for us to yell? Where do I send the invoice, McConnell? The rest of you, where do I send the invoice? I have been waiting for decades, even before Iran-Contra, for that Soros money. Where is it? I don't know where to send the invoice. Maybe McConnell and the rest of the GOP knows. Because if they're paying for us to yell, I'm owed a bunch of money. A bunch. So when you find that out, would you please let me know? Because we really do need it here at Netruse Radio. Boy, oh boy. Well, what's on the rest of the menu today? Well, starting off, of course, that was Colin Powell sitting with Madeleine Albright. It was his little block. But he's claiming that Trump is incapable of being a moral leader in the world. And I suppose we could have come to that conclusion without Colin Powell proclaiming it on a weekend news show. But it's always good. It's always good to have someone of his stature come out and say that. It's good. On the rest of the menu, some very, very, very sad stories, brutal stories over the weekend. Bulgarian investigative journalist Viktoria Marinova was brutally raped and murdered in the northern town of Ruse. Saudi Arabia murdered Washington Post reporter Jamal Khashoggi inside its consulate in Turkey. Of course, they're saying he wasn't killed inside the consulate. Yeah, maybe just right outside. And Interpol chief Meng Hongwei is detained in China as concerns for his safety grow. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where flipping the Colorado Senate could mean great things for Colorado voters, and Trump's failing Scottish golf resort lost $43 million in the last 4 years. And Daddy's dead. He can't come to help him now. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will notice some links in which you can find out if you are registered to vote, and also to register to vote. So do check that out. There's many states. Georgia is one of them that you only have until tomorrow to make sure you're registered. And there's a lot of people that have been voting since they could first vote at 18. And they haven't missed a vote for 20, 30 years. And they have gone to Rock the Vote and these other sites and found out they'd been purged. So don't just presume that you're on there just because you voted every time. If you got a D, a designation, yeah, I would immediately find out if you're still registered. Don't leave it up to chance. We need every vote because we have to overwhelm them. And even then it's going to be trouble, but we have to overwhelm them. Okay? So do that. Going to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page, you will notice the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Now, that's a good place to engage, so please do. Do also check out Kelly's shows on Saturdays. She does At the Table with Kelly Lincoln at 3 p.m. on the West Coast. That would be 6 p.m. on the East Coast. Then later on, she teams up with Ricky, and they command the Round Table Roundhouse Power Hour. And that begins at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast. If you then look to the leftish of the page, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and to the leftish of the chat room link is the Contribute button. Please become a Patreon of Netroots Radio. Every little bit helps. If you can afford a cup of coffee, can you afford to buy us a cup of coffee once a month? That goes a long way to paying our bills. And we are unable to do this without you. So please help us out. And we do appreciate the generosity of those who have. Thank you very much. Let's see. Oh, you know what? You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We are on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Co's, where I can be found as Justice Putnam. You can follow the show on Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter as well, but we are under the designation of at Cookbook West. So follow us there. You can also pick up podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. All right, this first article here, really, it just is heartbreaking. And it's also maddening, because journalists have been getting killed at a regular clip since Trump took over all around the world. Now, they were being killed at a regular clip before, but it's only increased. And the way that Viktoria Marinova was murdered and raped has an eerie similarity to a sexual abuse that had been publicized during the Supreme Court confirmation hearing for Kavanaugh. Yeah, it looks like Marinova showed signs of blows to the head and suffocation. like they covered her mouth to muffle her screams. Telling. Now, an investigative television journalist has been raped and murdered in Bulgaria's northern town of Ruse, according to officials. The body of 30-year-old Viktoria Marinova, whom authorities identified only by her initials, was found Saturday in a park. Her mobile phone, car keys, glasses, and part of her clothes were missing. That was Georgy Gorgiev, who is the Rus regional prosecutor, said. She was killed by blows on the head and suffocation, Gorgiev said, adding that prosecutors were probing all leads, both personal and linked to Marinova's job. Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with her job. You know, like investigating corruption? No. Interior Minister Mladen Marinov later confirmed to journalists that the victim had also been raped. Prime Minister Boyko Borisov expressed hope that the investigation would succeed because of the work that has been done. Thanks to the large amount of DNA material collected, it is just a matter of time before the perpetrator will be found. Police sources told the AFP news agency that the crime did not immediately appear linked to her work. Oh, I should mention that this article is out of Al Jazeera. I looked at all sorts of different news platforms, but Al Jazeera seems to have the most succinct and complete reportage on this. Also, it's an anonymous worker, be it Al Jazeera, who put this together. Let's see. Media Freedom Representative Harlem Desir condemned Marinova's killing on Twitter, shocked by horrific murder of investigative journalist Viktoria Marinova in Bulgaria. Urgently called for a full and thorough investigation. Those responsible must be held to account. Marinova was an administrative director of Ruse's small private TV and television and had recently launched a new current events talk show called Detector. The last episode of the show, on September 30th, broadcast interviews with investigative journalist Dimitar Stoyanov from the bivlov.bg website and Tila Biro from the Romanian Rise Project about an investigation of alleged fraud with EU funds linked to big business and politicians. The pair were briefly detained by police, drawing condemnation from Reporters Without Borders. We are in shock. In no way, under any form, never have we received any threats aimed at her or the television, a journalist from TVN told AFP under the condition of anonymity, adding that he and his colleagues feared for their safety. In a statement on their Facebook page, bivol.bg insisted for police protection of Marinova's colleagues, and a candlelight vigil in Marinova's memory is organized for Monday evening in Sofia. Joshua Eaton of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Saudi Arabia murdered dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside its consulate in Istanbul, unnamed Turkish officials told Reuters and the Washington Post. We believe that the murder was premeditated and the body was subsequently moved out of the consulate, one official told Reuters. Khashoggi, who was a critic of the Saudi government, went to the consulate Tuesday to get paperwork for his upcoming wedding while his fiancée, Hatice Cengiz, waited outside. Saudi officials have said Khashoggi left soon after, but Cengiz said she never saw him leave. Well, he was carried out the back door. Yeah. My sense is that he's been killed. That was an advisor to Turkish President Erdogan, Yasin Akte. Khashoggi and Şengix were set to marry on last Wednesday. She reacted with disbelief Saturday to reports that Saudi officials murdered Khashoggi inside the consulate. Jamal was not killed, and I don't believe he was killed, she wrote on Twitter in Arabic. And that was according to a translation by Reuters. But Turan Kisliaki, a friend of Khashoggi, and the head of the Turkish Arab Media Association said Sunday that officials told him Khashoggi is dead. We have evidence. He was killed in a barbaric way. Kisliak said he was told, we will announce it tomorrow or the day after. Saudi Arabia has denied the allegations. Reporters from Reuters toured the Saudi consulate on Saturday with Consul General Mohammed Al-Otaibi, but the consulate said it cannot release surveillance footage, not until they've doctored it some first. Of course. An official at the Consulate General of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Istanbul dismissed the report by Reuters, which cited Turkish officials that Saudi citizen Jamal Khashoggi was killed in the consulate in Istanbul. He may have been a Saudi citizen, but he was a U.S. resident with a green card. Let's not forget that. Oh, has there been any word from maybe Pompeo? No. This is what happens when you get a CIA director taking over the State Department, isn't it? The official strongly denounced the baseless allegations and expressed his doubt that they came from Turkish officials that are informed of the investigation or are authorized to comment on the issue. And that was the Saudi press agency had stated that. Officials who spoke with the Washington Post and Reuters pointed to a group of 15 Saudi nationals that entered Turkey on Tuesday, but has now left after briefly visiting the consulate. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, son of King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, and the country's de facto ruler, have overseen reforms like allowing women to drive. Wow, that's really advancing it. And an anti-corruption campaign. But his government has also jailed and executed critics whom it is generally accused of being either terrorists or spies. Maybe both. Khashoggi was a U.S. resident and a Washington Post contributor. The State Department said it is not in a position to confirm these reports, but is following them closely. Yeah, that's what happens when you have the CIA director, Pompeo, taking over the State Department. They don't know what's going on, and they don't know how to react. Now, previous administrations have been loath to criticize Saudi Arabia too harshly for its support of Islamic terrorists, its ongoing war in Yemen, and its poor human rights record. But if the allegations are borne out, Khashoggi's killing could strain the historically close relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. Actually, I don't think that it will damage relationships between Trump and Saudi Arabia. Trump hates the press, and he would love to be able to kill somebody with his own hands. How small they are. If this is true, that the Saudis lured a U.S. resident to their consulate and murdered him, it should represent a fundamental break in our relationship with Saudi Arabia. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, tweeted on Saturday. And Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat of Virginia, said Sunday that he has contacted the State Department over the allegations. We must get to the bottom of what happened and then impose strong consequences, Kaine said. Targeting journalists must stop. Well, obviously, if it's Democrats that are saying that, they aren't Americans. The only Americans that count are the ones that are in collusion with a hostile foreign power. We Democrats are now not Americans, actually. Funny how that works out. Trump has not commented on the current allegations, but during a rally in Mississippi on Wednesday, he did criticize Saudi Arabia for what he said is its reliance on U.S. support, because he's still thinking that all of this diplomacy is some sort of protection racket and we aren't getting paid. We protect Saudi Arabia, Trump said. Would you say they're rich? And I love the king, King Salman, but I said, King, we're protecting you. You may not you might not be there for 2 weeks without us. And bin Salman appeared to take that jab in stride. When asked about the criticism, the Crown Prince said, "I love working with him." Joshua Eaton also brings us this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And, of course, he is out of Think Progress. The Interpol chief is detained in China, and he messaged his wife a picture of a knife just before he disappeared. Chinese officials said yesterday that they have detained the country's vice minister of public security, who also heads the International Criminal Police Organization, known as Interpol. Meng Hongwei disappeared on September 25th after messaging an image of a knife to his wife. "I think he means he is in danger," Grace Meng told reporters in Lyon, France, where Interpol is based. Mrs. Yang declined to show her face during the press conference, fearing for her safety and the safety of her family. French authorities have given her police protection and are investigating her husband's disappearance. Shortly after Ms. Meng spoke, China's new anti-corruption agency, the National Supervision Commission, announced that her husband is in its custody. Meng Hongwei, Deputy Prime Minister of the Ministry of Public Security, is suspected of violating the law and is currently under the supervision of the National Supervision Commission, or the NSC, and that was in a statement according to its website. Mr. Meng resigned his post at Interpol shortly after the announcement was made, the organization said. And they did not say what law Mr. Meng is accused of violating. Mr. Meng, age 64, is only the latest high-profile figure to disappear in China under increasingly hardline rule of President Xi Jinping, who has launched a broad crackdown on corruption that has also swept up activists, human rights workers, and political opponents. One of China's most famous actresses, Fan Bingbing, disappeared in July amid widespread suspicion that she was arrested for alleged tax evasion. Chinese state media confirmed Fan's arrest in early September, only to take the article offline within hours. And the government finally announced a fine against Ms. Fan last week. She has also cracked down on disputed minority regions like Tibet and Xinjiang, where some have long harbored hopes of independence from mainland China. In Xinjiang, officials have swept tens of thousands of Uyghur Muslims into re-education camps to strip them of their religious and ethnic identity. Wow. Who would want to do that? Riyad Toom, a professor of history at Loyola University, compared the situation in Xinjiang with the Cultural Revolution, which saw political purges, destruction of cultural treasures, arrests, torture, and executions across China. Well, it looks like it's about time to get to our break, which we will do. And when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, doing more. Donald Trump has the role and the powers of the President of the United States of America. He either doesn't know what those are or doesn't care, maneuvering instead to be the type of rapacious, unimpeachable, despotic strongman that our country has claimed to oppose for the last 70 years. If that scares you, then congratulations. You have at least a passing interest in living in a democracy, and you should never listen to an evening talk show host skewer Trump again. Instead, you should watch Michael Moore's latest piece of gonzo documentary activism, Fahrenheit 11/9. Michael Moore makes documentaries like Protesters Make Signs, championing the people who think they are the consumers in our corporate, mercantile, militaristic society, but who are, more often than not, the consumed. This film finds Moore talking with working-class blacks and whites who have been mangled by Republicans and abandoned by Democrats, and who now stand to be devastated by Trump and his ilk. These examinations take him back to his hometown, Flint, Michigan. Yeah, that Flint. To look at how Michigan's former CEO Governor Rick Snyder has poisoned one of his cities. But Moore also spends time with Parkland High School gun control activists. He spends time with the new grassroots Democratic candidates who are challenging the party elite. Because where there's a similar appeal to a Moore movie and a Colbert monologue, there's an important difference. They're both funny. Moore likes to laugh just as much as you do. Moore still has his signature theatrical activist turns aimed at the people who are used to unimpeachably dishing it out, but Moore is not out to sell network ad dollars. He doesn't want you calmed down and ready to buy something. He wants to show you that you can fight back, even if it's with a movie camera. Fahrenheit 11/9 shows how we got here, but more importantly, shows it's possible to get up and get out there. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Ever hear of the pronghorn antelope in the American West? Well, it's not really an antelope. It's actually more closely related to giraffes than to true antelopes. And the last known migration of pronghorns occurs between Grand Teton National Park and the Upper Green River Basin in western Wyoming. The so-called Path of the Pronghorn stretches more than 150 miles and is one of the longest mammal migration corridors that remains in North America. That stretch is also the only federally designated wildlife migration corridor. The trouble is that the corridor intersects with roads and fences, presenting obvious problems for the animals. So Wyoming officials built 8 wildlife crossings along some 12 miles of U.S. Highway 191, 2 overpasses and 6 underpasses. But having a crossing doesn't mean that wildlife will use it. So researchers decided to assess the impacts of the $9.7 million investment.
We're out in the field on spotting scopes watching these animals as they're approaching brand new structures. And this was just a perfect setting because we had been studying these pronghorn, these animals on their long distance migration for, about a decade.
Wildlife Conservation Society biologist Renee Seidler, now at the Idaho Department of Fish and Game. She focused her observations on an area called Trapper's Point. Twice a year, between 1,000 and 2,000 pronghorn, along with some 3,000 mule deer, pass through this area. Archaeological evidence indicates that pronghorn have been moving through Trapper's Point for at least 6,000 years. But now they have to contend with highways and fast cars. Before the wildlife crossings were built, the 12 miles of the 2-lane Highway 191 saw an average of 85 animal-vehicle collisions each year.
We looked at how many times an animal would attempt to use the crossing structure before they were able to successfully get to the other side. And the success rate of crossing within that definition increased over time.
In other words, the pronghorn eventually learned to use the crossing. And that's good news for motorists, too. Seidler found a 70% reduction in wildlife vehicle collisions. The results are in the journal Global Ecology and Conservation. 4 years after the crossings were built, Every single pronghorn successfully used them to avoid the highway and complete their migration.
These are migrations that have been compared to migrations on the Serengeti in Africa. These are stellar long-distance migrations. I think as a culture, we should hold innate pride in that. Wyoming did a really good thing when they put in these crossing structures and fences so that these animals continue their migration.
Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Listen, can you hear it? Listen to the eerie sound of silence from the trumpeteers and congressional Republicans who so loudly cheered themselves just a year ago for bestowing $1 trillion tax giveaway on corporate elites. They told us they did it not for the rich, but to help the middle class and poor families. How would enriching the already rich benefit the rest of us? Trickle-down economics 101, said Trump and company, explaining that giving more money to elites would spark, quote, an immediate jump in wage growth, because CEOs would use their bonanza to reward workers for their productivity. The White House even got specific, declaring that average pay would jump as much as $9,000 per person. But here we are in the thick of the 2018 congressional elections, and shh, silence. Not a single lawmaker who voted for this grand ideological promise is mentioning it, much less running ads touting their role and hammering the plan into law. Why so shy? Because their trickle-down giveaway was a crude hoax from the start. CEOs spent the GOP's trillion-dollar boondoggle on lifting their own exorbitant pay. Moneyed elites got the gold mine, working families got the shaft. Far from a $9,000 income boost, the workaday majority of Americans now find that their hourly earnings are lower than a year ago. But who cares? Being a trumpeter Republican means never admitting your lies and never apologizing. Steve Mnuchin, a former Wall Street banker who's now the Treasury Secretary, is a perfect example of a blasé, ethically challenged Trump huckster. He recently shrugged off the failure of the bloated tax cut to raise working people's income. Wages are going up on some people, he declared disingenuously. This is Jim Hightower saying, yeah, for multimillionaires like him. Yet he wonders why most Americans despise him and his ilk.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com. Welcome to this abbreviated edition of the Coffee Cast. Now, you would think that being a Democrat in a blue state like Oregon would be a slam dunk to win the governor's race. But think again. Last night, October 6th, Governor Kate Brown stood before a room of Democrats and made a very quick speech. The audio is not great, but I think you'll get what's at stake here in a blue state like Oregon. A conservative Republican named Newt Bueller is running against Kate. You'll hear her talk about his record. Newt represents Bend. That's located in central Oregon. Newt is a Republican, so sure of himself he'll win the governorship. He moved from Bend at least 100 miles or more to a new home close to the Capitol without resigning his seat or even telling his constituents. And did I say that he'd like you to think that he's a moderate when he's not? That's just a little bit of Newt Bueller's fantasy. Nevertheless, I'll just step aside, and on the day Brett Kavanaugh became Supreme Court Justice, Kate Brown makes the case why a liberal Democrat would make a powerful stand against Trump and the Republicans.
I could name there's about 20 bills that we were the first in the nation to do, but I'll just name a couple. Number one, our automatic voter registration. We believe that your vote is your voice, and every single voice matters. Number two, our coal to clean. Moving away from coal-generated electricity in the country. Number three, there's so many. Number three, our fair scheduling bill. Why is this important? It's really important that people working for big companies know they're scheduled 2 weeks at a time, so they can schedule daycare, job training opportunities, and educational opportunities. Fair scheduling, the first in the entire country. Number two, we need a governor who's willing to stand up to the Trump administration. It's been a really rough week, a rough couple of weeks. I am here to say that I believe all survivors and their voices must be heard. Yes. My opponent waited till Thursday to make a decision on the Kavanaugh appointment. I knew where I was immediately because I know how it's so important that we protect voting rights across the country and reproductive rights for people with uteruses. Number three, we need a governor we can trust. We have a president in the White House we can't trust. We don't need more men in power that we can't trust. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm running against two candidates, Representative Newt Bueller and candidate Newt Bueller. Yeah. Well, you know, candidate Newt Bueller says he's pro-choice. But Representative Newt Bueller voted against the very legislation that would ensure that women in this state, regardless of their income, regardless of their zip code, and regardless of their immigration status, would have access to the full complement of reproductive health services. So do you think we need a governor we can trust? Yeah. I could go on. You'll hear him in the next ads. Number four, we need a governor who's willing to bring people together, Republicans and Democrats, and solve the problems facing Oregon. I am the only candidate in this race that has a track record of working across the aisle to tackle the problems facing Oregonians. And you know what? We worked with Republicans and Democrats to continue funding for the Oregon Health Plan so that 430,000 vulnerable Oregonians could have access to health care. And number two, I worked with the Senate Republican leader to make sure that every single child in this state, regardless of their immigration status, has access to health care coverage. That was 18,000 children. Do you know where my opponent was? He's made millions in the healthcare industry. Millions and millions. He voted no. So do you think we need a governor who will bring Republicans and Democrats together to tackle the problems facing Oregon? Yeah. Last but not least, what happens in 2020? Census! Do you want a governor who's going to help draw a redistricting plan that reflects the diversity of our communities and the changing faces of Oregon? I'll just say, now is not the time for Oregon to go backward. With your help, we can keep Oregon moving forward. Thank you so much. Let's get out there and win in November.
And that's Governor Kate Brown in Clackamas County, Oregon. Check your registration and vote. I'm Tom.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your world in 2 minutes. A Congolese doctor renowned for treating victims of sexual violence and a young female Yazidi who spoke out about her rape by Islamic State soldiers have been awarded the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize. Physician Denis Mukwege founded the Panzi Hospital in 1999 and has subsequently treated thousands of men and women assaulted over the course of the Congolese Civil War and ongoing violence in the region. He was performing a surgery Friday morning when he received news of his award. Fellow prize winner, 25-year-old Nadia Murad, gained international attention after telling reporters visiting an Iraqi refugee camp of her capture, rape, and enslavement by the Islamic State during the terror group's attempted purge of the Yazidi religious minority.
The nature of this abuse is that the victim feels guilty, the victim gets a stigma, and the victim will not speak.
Berit Reiss-Andersen chairs the Norwegian Nobel Committee, which awards the Peace Prize.
Dennis Mukwege has through many years tried to speak on behalf of his patients who are victims. Nadia Murad is extraordinary in the sense that she used her personal experience as a platform to speak up about this kind of atrocity that is really of a nature where you hardly believe, how is it possible? How can people do these things?
Asked if this year's prize relates to the ongoing Me Too movement, Reiss-Andersen said in both cases it's important women speak up. But she also distinguished a campaign aimed at addressing how men and women interact in civil society with acts of violence that often amount to war crimes, including crimes targeting men, as when the U.S. military forced Iraqi prisoners to perform sexual acts during interrogations at the infamous Abu Ghraib prison. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 51 degrees, and it looks like we had an overnight low in the low 50s. Winds currently are negligible out of the west-southwest, light and variable, about 1 mile per hour. And that will continue all day and all night into tomorrow. Indeed. So it will be light and variable. We should be getting a high of around 70 today, overnight lows in the low 50s. And then we'll be in the upper 60s tomorrow. Increasing chance of rain this afternoon. And increasing ever so more overnight. And it looks like we'll have showers in the morning tomorrow. So looking like we'll get maybe a quarter inch of rain. Let's hope so. Ragweed pollen here in the area remains high. The air quality index is good, though it has gone up to 17 parts per million. I think because people are burning wood in their fireplaces, so that might have something to do with it. And the daytime UV index is moderate at 4, which is, I guess, indicative of the angle of the sun. We are in fall. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.02 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles. And relative humidity is up to 91%. Well, we are supposed to get some rain. Okay. Weather from around the world is brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchased. These people planted. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 61 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 64 and sunny. Rome is 76 degrees and partly cloudy. Kiev is 61 and mostly cloudy. I already said that. Kabul is 55 and also mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 75 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 68 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 63 degrees and sunny. And they have a weather advisory. Let me open this up ever so quickly and find out what it is. Oh, well, it is a small craft advisory. Looks like that is on the bay and offshore. And it looks like they're going to have sustained gusts. Now, this advisory is between 1 p.m. and 11 p.m. Today and through tomorrow. And this is, of course, on the Bay and San Francisco Bay and offshore. It looks like winds will be at 15 to 20 knots with gusts up to 30 knots. So do take care. And New York, New York is 64 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. First offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is an article out of Share Blue Media by Eric Bullard. Now, flipping the Colorado Senate could be great things for Colorado voters since Republicans in the state have been blocking key bills for years. Colorado Democrats, for years, have been passing common sense, progressive legislation through the state's House chamber, only to be thwarted by GOP obstruction in the Senate. Now, with a definite prospect of flipping the state Senate in November, there's a chance those key pieces of legislation, including a family leave bill and crucial gun safety legislation, could finally be freed out of committee and sent to the desk of a Democratic governor. I just love it when Trump says Democrats are the party of obstruction. Project much, Donnie? The unfolding Colorado Senate race is among the most closely watched state legislative contests in the country. It finds Republicans on the defensive in a Mountain West state where voters are moving to the left, and a state where Trump is not a popular figure. Sensing vulnerability, the billionaire Koch brothers are trying to bail out of local Republican candidates with an infusion of cash. They're trying to bail them out, I should say. Though the RNC and the NRSCC, or the financial part of the Republican Party, is pulling funds away from contests that they just don't want to fight, because it seems like they're just going to be throwing money away. Democrats are likely to retain control of the Colorado House in November and stand a good chance of maintaining the governorship. If they're successful flipping the Senate, it would give the party a trifecta. 5 key races, all featuring Democratic women, will likely determine control of the General Assembly's upper chamber, where the GOP currently enjoys just a 1-seat margin. Among those closely watched candidates is Faith Winter, who has been sponsoring state-funded family leave legislation for several previous sessions where it passes the Democratic House and they get shelved in the GOP Senate. The Democratic plan aims to create a statewide fund for paid family leave benefits for working Coloradans who face a long-term illness or who are caring for a sick family member, a newborn, or newly adopted child. Another key piece of legislation that's bound to return next session is the so-called red flag bill, designed to curb gun violence by allowing family members to petition a court for an emergency order to take away guns from someone who is believed to be a danger. The bill passed the Colorado House last session. The issue took on added urgency when a man with a known history of mental illness in Douglas County opened fire on Colorado police officers when they responded to a call at his apartment. 3 officers were injured, and 1 was killed in the ambush-style attack. Now, let me remind folks, that was not MS-13. It wasn't Black Lives Matter killing these cops. All right? Let's be clear. When the red flag bill got to the Senate, it was promptly assigned to the GOP-controlled State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, where it was postponed indefinitely. Another Democratic bill that regularly dies in the GOP Senate is one that bans conversion therapy, the widely discredited practice of trying to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. 11 other states, plus the District of Columbia, have already outlawed the bogus practice. If Colorado Democrats flip the Senate, that state might soon become the 12th.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Dan Desai-Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this last offering here at the Chef's Table in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, for any of those of you who have not seen You've Been Trumped, you've got to see it. It's on YouTube. Go online and just say, type in You've Been Trumped, and it'll take you to this documentary about when Trump was securing this Scottish golf resort, where he has now lost $43 million in the last 4 years. Seems without daddy to bail him out, his business failures pile up for all of us to see. Trump's abject failure as a businessman, from casinos to real estate, is widely known. His anti-Midas touch extends beyond the U.S. to Turnberry, Trump's flagship Scottish golf resort, which is reporting losses of nearly $43 million U.S., and that would be 33 million pounds for the 4 years Trump has owned it. According to the Scotsman, now that's the Scottish newspaper, of course, the resort lost $4.4 million last year alone. The latest annual loss is notable, writes the Scotsman, given it covers the first full year of operations since the reopening of the resort after an extensive redevelopment of both its hotel and Ailsa golf course. The resort has never turned a profit under Trump's ownership, even as Trump siphoned U.S. tax dollars to help prop up the failing property. In July 2018, Trump visited Turnberry as part of his disastrous trip to the UK. On that visit, the State Department shelled out more than $65,000 for accommodations. Now, of course, that's the trip where Londoners flew the famous baby Trump balloon. Yeah, he didn't like that at all. Trump's business failures are nothing new, but in the past, his father regularly bailed him out, and we know that because of that explosive and comprehensive New York Times report. One time, the elder Trump sent someone to purchase $3.5 million in casino chips from Trump's failing Castle Casino in an illegal scheme to pass along funds to the younger Trump, since the casino was so far underwater. Trump's troubles at Turnberry are both unsurprising given his past failures and self-inflicted. Trump's divisiveness does appear to be keeping some visitors away, Bloomberg noted. At the pro shop, Trump-branded gear was being offered up with 2-for-1 deals, but folks still were not buying. Now, in September, Trump embarrassed himself and the country at the United Nations as world leaders openly laughed at Trump's speech before the body. Trump's humiliation seemingly no bounds as his failures in business and politics grow by the day. Indeed. All right. We are at the end of our broadcast period for the day, but Networks Radio broadcasts on for all the breaking news. We will visit with you tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Networks Radio all day and all night for all that breaking news as it breaks. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.